Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you would please, but I just would like to call your attention to this outstanding panel we have here today. This panel is entitled Tips for Success in Doing Business in China, and we have three different perspectives. We have a perspective from, and they're all very experienced perspectives. We have a perspective from a consumer products vantage point, from an infrastructure vantage point, and then from a on-the-ground asset vantage point. So I'd like to just offer a few comments about tips for success in China, or at least to lead this panel off. You've heard from our previous panels, in fact, how big the China economy is and what the opportunity presents. But from a U.S. exporter's perspective, I would just like to share that when we start looking at the path of our economy here in the U.S. and what that means for companies operating here in the U.S., that our future really depends on exports. If we look at the growth levers of government expenditure, consumption spending, business investment, we all know essentially that a number of those have already been tapped out. Exporting, on the other hand, we have only 2% of U.S. companies exporting. 10% of our GDP is exporting. It should be up somewhere between 20 and 30%. And when you look at the OECD, a recent study by OECD suggested that in the next 20 years, and you'll hear more from our luncheon panel about this, but in the next 20 years, consumption spending in Asia, driven primarily by China, will grow from about $5 trillion today to $30 trillion of consumption spending. $5 trillion to $30 trillion in 20 years. You can do the math on that, and that's almost, quickly, it must be about a 20% annual growth rate in consumption spending. The U.S. will grow maybe from 5.7 to 5.8 or $6 trillion. Europe will from about 8.3 trillion to about 11.3 trillion. So you can see the massive opportunity that exists there. Right now, what we're, mainly what we've been selling to China is information technologies equipment, machinery and equipment, and management services that go along with not only installing but maintaining that type of equipment, and raw materials. When we start looking at broader China, meaning Hong Kong, Taiwan, and other areas, those countries have been helping us facilitate products that are not really focused on the export processing sector that has been the main contributor to a lot of China's growth. Those countries, Taiwan, Hong Kong, are taking products that need to be localized to put in the Chinese market. So the thing that I think most of the panelists will suggest that in order for a company to be successful in China, they actually have to go there and understand the needs of the customer. Understand, what are their needs, what are their interests, and that can't be done from sitting over here in the United States. You actually have to go and understand the customer. So why is it only 2% of these companies are exporting? Americans are not big risk takers. We're not big risk takers. We look at that as being quite a bit far away. Or the domestic market has been so strong there hasn't been a reason to look outside. But if you're a country like Finland and you're making mobile phones, you have to go to market because there's only so many people who are going to buy a mobile phone in Finland. And when you start looking at the consumption expenditure that we expect for Asia, you have to start looking at it from that perspective. That's where the customers are going to be. So we have a distinguished panel of experts here to share with you their tips for success in China. And I'd like to introduce them one by one, just ahead of their presentation. Our first presenter, Mr. Christopher Meyer, has been doing business in China for over 20 years. He's held senior executive sales and marketing positions in the information technology sector, amongst others. He's handled consumer products, as well as business-to-business products in China. And he is currently the president of AsiaGlobal, which is an international consulting and market development firm that helps companies export to Asia. So I'd just like to welcome Mr. Meyer up here to share his tips for success in China.
Thank you very much. And I have about 10 minutes, so I'm going to be skipping some slides and just trying to move along as quickly as possible. This is basically an overview of where I'm going to go with this. And I wanted to say that I got interested in China when I was 17 years old in a European history class in high school. And immediately when our professor diverged to discuss the Opium Wars, I heard the history, and over a couple days period was fascinated with Chinese history, and went on and studied Chinese in university and went to USC Business School and have been involved in various government and private business in China my entire career. And I want to tell you, I think that it's incumbent upon American companies to export, especially with the devaluation of the dollar and our economic situation. And my remarks are really about any company that wants to do business in China. What are the ABCs to get that done? What does an American need to know to fit your business model into the China market? And it can be really any kind of business, and it could be any kind of operation, not simply consumer products, but whatever you want to get done. It could even be exporting your services. So very quickly, the first thing is doing your homework, and that includes deciding whether or not your product is differentiated enough or has other characteristics that would succeed in a market like China. You also have to consider the method of business that you're going to conduct. In most cases, you will need a partner in China. And so you have to decide if that's going to be an agent, a distributor, or what you're going to do. Very few situations will you be establishing your own enterprise in China. Probably most people in this room are looking at finding a partner. And the key is, how do you work with that partner? And the third thing is discussing where to go. And throughout my entire career, when I was doing market entry in Asia, I always like to have about 3 opportunities that I was evaluating and executing at one time, because things happen. And that also means diversifying the markets that you're hitting. So I suggest American companies don't just look at China, but look at the entire Asia-Pacific region and pick your priority markets. The first thing, and there are really three pieces, is number 1, identifying a prospective partner. And in that, what you want to do is find about 4 candidates before you ever leave this country. And then once you get in country, and you really have to go, you want to double that, at least. And there are a lot of reasons to do that. You just move up the learning curve that much faster when you're starting to talk to people. You don't wait till you get in country. Do a lot of work here. I also recommend any company that's looking at serious business to contract with the U.S. Commercial Service, their office here in Newport Beach, Brentwood, LA. Buy an agent distributor search service, and they can pretty much help you identify people from, you could be at your desk and give them about 6 months, but work with those offices. It's absolutely the best deal in the market. The other thing is, you have a great resource if you're from Southern California right here. When I was launching consumer products in Asia, I was based in Connecticut. I would fly out to LA and go to cash and carries. I could speak to Koreans, Japanese, Chinese. It's a huge market here, and you have opportunities in a lot of the Chinese American communities to develop a lot of relationships. Consider articles or advertisements in the newspapers, the chambers of commerce. This is a huge opportunity. And then a couple other opportunities if you're looking at identifying prospective partners. Top of my list, of course, is commercial service, not only here, but in country, in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Chengdu, and Shenyang still. you have well-staffed offices, and you also have a network that they have, Commerce has worked out with Chinese organization in many, many other cities. They can pretty much help you out in almost any city in China. The other interesting thing is the U.S.-China Business Council. Now, for small, medium-sized companies, it costs about $2,700 to join the U.S.-China Business Council. And I also recommend Ben Lai's group right here, but the U.S.-China Business Council is in Washington, D.C. They've been around since the 70s. They have office in Shanghai and Beijing. And for that $2,700, you can basically get an incredible amount of intelligence, and they will network you with their members in similar industries. They'll help you identify potential partners, and you'll have access to their virtual library. And there's a lot of research that they do that could be useful. I'll just keep moving. But the bottom line here is you don't have to have a whole career of network in Guangxi in China to start doing business in China. You can take these steps, and it's really incumbent upon Americans to do that. And then the important thing is evaluation. I can't tell you in my years of doing business how many companies have just taken their first candidate and made them their partner in that country. You know, an American company, they meet this Korean company or Chinese company or Malaysian company, and all of a sudden they're partners. I really think that the evaluation is a critical part of this, and what you want to do is find out who a potential candidate is, and this can be a lot of fun. You're going to ask them about their background, get to know them, and find out what their organization chart looks like, how they work, you know, how they basically serve their other clients, and what kind of business model they have. Finding out how they pay is very important. And when I was doing this throughout Asia, I always liked to visit the trade with these companies. So I would ask the general manager if I could spend a day or half a day with their best sales rep, or maybe not their best sales rep, but you actually, whatever your product is, go all the way through the chain and with them and analyze it. And then, of course, you want to know who's their day-to-day contact, and you should be very transparent about who yours is, both on the accounting side and the business side. All these things should be discussed when you're evaluating. And then if the candidate is someone you're really interested in, start talking about business development. How would you actually start attacking the market? And then the next step is recruitment. I was once consulting to a company who had a really experienced VP of International, and he negotiated tougher than I've ever seen anybody, but he negotiated a project in Malaysia, and the distributor just went along, signed the contract, they never sold one unit. So besides kicking their tires, you want them to kick your tires, and you should be open about that and realize that you're sort of recruiting a partner that you're going to work with for a long time. And when you're doing that, you'll want to let them know, especially in China, what your company has been awarded, what your products, how your products have been recognized, without being braggadocious. You just want to sort of explain why your product is great, and then show how they'll make money. The other thing is, since it's a multicultural environment, sometimes Americans tend to be a little bit unsure about what to do. The best thing you can do is show a real keen and sincere interest in their business. So they're making money. How are they doing that? And really explore that. Other quick tips is test market strategy. The same way you develop a network in Southern California, you can actually do test marketing in certain markets. A second city approach. We won't really have time to talk about it, but I have a good case study about an American company that went from 0 sales to 5 million sales in 4 years in the beauty care products by using a second city approach. Internet sales. Now this is where barriers to entry are not really great, and Chinese internet sales have gone from 350 billion up to over 680 billion just in the last year, and they'll overtake the US by the year 2015. And one issue there is that the Chinese shipping costs are about $1 per kilo, whereas US shipping costs internally, domestically, are about $6. So there's some good reasons. Chinese companies are definitely putting online sales front and center, and Lenovo is building their entire sales channel around internet sales. And Taobao is one of the best. You can actually go to Taobao and get a sense for what they're doing. They're a real market leader in this, and you can sell anything on the internet. You just need a good partner. Quick point about China. And Randall Long mentioned how big the market is. This chart, I don't know if you can see it, but it lists the provinces with their population, and then next to it, in the far right, is the equivalent of other countries. So Guangdong is like Mexico. Shandong is the Philippines. Sichuan province has the population of Germany. So when you're thinking about, when you're doing your homework, how many markets do you want to attack? And Chinese is not a monolithic market. I always ask people where they're from, what province they're from, and they're always interested to know, if they're working in Shenzhen, I want to know, where did you really come from? Because you probably weren't born in Shenzhen. And these cultural differences within the country are key, so you want to kind of think about what part of the market you want to attack and how you're going to do that. That's a case study on the professional hair care product. It was a very successful project, and I better not keep going on. I'm thinking I have 2 minutes or 1. Anyway, the key thing here is working with your new partners. Americans want to do things a certain way, and in Asia, and especially in China, things will not happen that way. So you have to figure out another way of getting from A to B. And I think one of the key things is look for a paradigm-shifting approach to your partner. And I'm going to talk about guanxi a little bit, so I'll just hold that until I get to the guanxi part. But you have to learn to accept some ambiguity, and you should become an expert in some area of the culture, history, or the market. Logistical issues, I'm just going to pass this. If anybody has questions about how do you literally get around and should you have an interpreter, there are important things to consider. So on this, I'll just go all the way down to guanxi and face. And Chinese first develop relationships and then they undertake tasks. Americans want to develop the relationship by undertaking tasks. So you have to remember, you're really not going to succeed with a partner unless you've really developed a relationship with that partner. And I have one quick example. In 2003, I started meeting a company in Jiangsu province, and we got along really well, and we hit a home run on a project. He hit a home run, and I invited him to the States and took him to Grand Canyon, Las Vegas, Chicago. We had a really great time, and that sort of solidified our relationship. And since then, we've been able to do so many things. It's like we're brothers. And we Skype a couple times a week. We work very closely together. But that would never have happened unless I made the effort to really bond with that person. And if you're an American company, you can do that with Chinese, but you have to be smart about how you do it. And some ideas are, if they have a family member that wants to study in the US, help facilitate that. Be a bridge for them and make it symbiotic. That kind of thing. The other thing is lack of attention to face. Face is very important, and you might not get answers very quickly in China, and you won't sometimes because of face, and you just have to understand that. I think a lot of American-Chinese business relationships sour because of this issue of face, and Americans just don't expect face is going to be that important, but it really is. And then another little slide on guanxi. This is an old map in China, and this shows a number of different kingdoms. If you grew up in Jiangsu province, you might live in a city like Suzhou or Nanjing. You have your own dialect. They speak Mandarin, but there's another, they'll have Suzhouhua, or Nanjinghua, Shanghai-hua. These are all dialects, and there's more than 50 dialects in China. And they come, from thousands of years of history, and at some point there was a kingdom in that area, and it might have been fighting with a kingdom 100 miles away or 50 miles away. So that's why Chinese are sort of conditioned to do business with people that they have a definitive relationship with. And guanxi is part of that. And if you're an American, you have to appreciate that. And you just can't walk into China and start writing orders, no matter how great your product is. You have to have that guanxi. And that's it. I hope I didn't go over too much. Thanks.
Our next presenter is Dr. Greg Smedley, and he's he got his Ph.D. at Caltech, of all places, which suggests something about his orientation. In fact, he is, as his education suggests, a renowned researcher, an educator and an industry leader with a diverse career that spans power electronics, medical devices, research and education at both Caltech and in the space exploration business at JPL. He is right now the Chief Executive Officer of One Cycle Control and is focused on tackling global scale problems in transportation, energy, electric grids, and low-cost access to space. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Greg Smedley.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation and look forward to meeting many of you as we go through the day today. I was a bit taken aback by Jeff's statements, his opening statements here, that 2% of the companies in the United States are exporting. Wow. I didn't realize we were in such a small category. That's amazing to me. I think that there needs to be a lot more export going on from the United States, and as clearly all the indicators show, if we want to grow, we need to really grow our exports. And second of all, at least at our company, we're very strong believers that the United States needs to start making things again. And so we're all about trying to develop products that deliver high value with very small amount of labor content so that we can ship product throughout the world. So with that, I'd like to just jump into the presentation. I'd like to give you an introduction to One Cycle Control, our company, and the things we focus on. And then talk to you a little bit about our first steps into China. And quite frankly, these are very early first steps into China that have taken quite a bit of time to develop. And a number of the statements made by Chris are indeed very worthwhile statements. I really look forward to getting a copy of his presentation later, because there's a lot of knowledge tied up in a lot of those comments on those slides. So One Cycle Control is the name of the company. It's also the name of the technology. So just to introduce One Cycle Control, we're located in Irvine. This is a picture of our headquarters. The technology comes from Caltech and UC Irvine. And just to sum it up, One Cycle Control is a high-tech power electronics company, creating power converters that can be used to connect sources of energy to the grid, or to connect loads to the grid, and also to stabilize that grid so that we can increase the penetration of renewables. We've executed on a number of government contracts from Department of Defense, the California Energy Commission, and the Department of Energy. Under Department of Defense, we developed power electronics pictured in the lower left there that enable those diesel generator sets to save about 10 to 30% of their fuel, which is a big deal, especially if you're the guy that has to drive the fuel across the desert. Under the California Energy Commission, we develop power converters that improve power quality so that we can reduce the congestion on our power distribution network. Typically, we're relieving about 20 to 30% of that congestion by using these types of power converters. We also developed peak load reduction systems, which I will talk about a little more, just to give you an idea of an example or an application of power electronics. This is used to shave peak load in facilities so that we reduce the disturbance on the electric grid, and as well can save money for those facilities on their electricity bill. Under Department of Energy, we develop power converters that can be connected to the grid at thousands of node points so that we stabilize the grid and enable us to increase the penetration of renewables. Right now, the passive grid as it exists today can support about a 15% penetration. Everybody wants a lot more green energy than that. With active stabilization at thousands of node points, we can stabilize the grid so that we can increase the penetration of renewables. That's what that type of power converter was developed to do. The Army was so pleased with what we did for them, they invited us to the Pentagon early last year in May to receive an award. Those are pictures of our team off to the right there. Myself, next to me is my wife of more than 22 years, who happens to also be the inventor of one-cycle control. She's a professor and founder of the UCI Power Electronics Lab. And next to her are two of her former graduate students who also came from China and who are our lead power electronics experts. When I get the three of them in a room, I tell them there isn't a single power electronics problem we can't solve when we've got these three in the room. So, and that is very true. And the team really knows how to execute. Yesterday I was further pleased when UL inspection came to inspect our production line in Irvine, and they gave us a go-ahead. So we now have the green light on 15 products that have all passed UL safety, and we're looking forward to pushing those into the market. We've also worked for a number of customers in industry that are developing various types of power or systems that require power electronics. Industries such as utility scale, aerospace, alternative energy, and advanced transportation. And I just will amplify one example there on the left is a wind turbine. On the back end of it, you're looking at the back end of it. That's the specialized generator that our customer is developing. They needed a 1/4 megawatt of power conversion. Typically, a 1/4 megawatt is about 10 times bigger than what you see in the picture there. By using our solution, they were able to fit the power electronics inside the base of the tower, as opposed to a system 10 times larger and about 5 times heavier, which they would have to do a lot of concrete work, underground wiring, big trucks and cranes. This could be installed in an hour and a half and connected to the grid and ready to go, so they were very happy with this solution. So I said 5 times lighter and 10 times smaller. Why is that important? I talked about creating high-value goods that can be exported around the world, in which case we need to reduce the amount of kilograms of raw material we use to process every kilowatt of electrical power. So we'd reduce the weight by 5x over what the typical legacy solutions are that you see off to the left there. So we'll use a lot less raw material on our production line. That also means we move 5 times less raw material through our supply chain. 10 times smaller, why is that important? When you make a product that's 10 times smaller than the competition, it means that your production facility is about 15 times smaller. Yes, honey, we shrunk the production line. So that's important to us. Also, we can fit 10 times as much in a shipping container. So here's an example of the peak load reduction system I promised. The objective here is to tie batteries to the grid using power electronics so that we can reduce the peak load demand of a facility so that we can stabilize the grid. And when we stabilize the grid, we can increase the penetration of renewables on that grid. This is what it basically looks like. Off to the left there, there's a silhouette of a man to give you an idea of scale. This is a lithium-ion batteries in the bottom connected with one of our power converters to the grid. There is something at the top there which is labeled power thermostat. Just as you set a thermostat in your house to control the temperature of your house, this will enable facilities to set a thermostat, a power thermostat, that will regulate the maximum kilowatt draw they pull from the grid. So if you look over the facility loads, such as motors and HVAC systems, they turn on and off as a function of time, and so the kilowatt demand from the grid goes up and down, up and down. And you can think of that as a kid holding a skipping rope, and they're doing, shaking the end, and that disturbs the grid. Every time that goes up and down, it disturbs the grid, and it disturbs it for other people that are using the grid as well as yourself. So by using the batteries, we can basically, whenever the peak goes too high, we shave it by delivering power from the battery, and when the peak drops below the set point, we recharge the battery so we're ready for the next peak, so that the kilowatt demand from the grid looks a lot more flat. This means that the grid is not being tortured, and so it's more stable, and we can therefore increase the penetration of renewables. Because just as these dynamic loads cause dynamic variations in the grid, dynamic sources such as PV, solar, or wind also dynamically destabilize the grid. So these types of widely distributed energy storage systems in various facilities can dramatically impact the grid stability. Just to give you an example, this is some data from our own facility. On the left, this is the 15-minute peak data from Southern California Edison meter on our facility. And as you can see throughout the day, this is a whole month of data plotted here. Throughout the day, the peak demand goes up and down, as you can imagine. The HVAC unit turns on and cools the place down, then it turns off, and then we have various loads in the building, including microwave oven and all those kinds of things. But also we do high-powered testing, which causes us to get some pretty high peaks sometimes. And when you get that high peak, it doesn't matter what time of day it is, whether you're doing that test at 3 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning on a Saturday night. Southern California Edison is perfectly happy to charge you a very high price for that 15-minute peak. Depending on your rate schedule, it could be $30 a peak kilowatt. So I'll let you do the math. That's 28 kilowatts there at $30 a peak kilowatt. That's a little bit of an extra charge on your electricity bill that month. Now, if you use peak load reduction, you can substantially change what that peak load profile looks like as a function of time, and here's just an example of that. This is a month of operation with the peak load reduction system in operation. So we substantially impacted our peak load, and we'd like to do that for a lot of customers. And we're talking about China a little bit today, so I just thought I'd throw this slide up there. Peak load reduction systems in, for example, all the hotels in the Pudong district in Shanghai can substantially improve the grid stability in that region, and as well likely enable them to increase and deploy a large penetration of PV solar in the same area where that power is being used. So let's get on to exporting to China. Really, as Chris stated in a lot more detail, I'm just going to give you this quick slide of summary. It's all about relationship building. It's a serious patience and investment of time in order to develop the relationships necessary to close the deal and move forward together in a win-win type of partnership. There are also sources available to help out, and Chris had already alluded to these. That's the Department of Commerce here and abroad. Their Gold Key services, which we've also taken advantage of, can be great ways to meet very high-level executives in various companies or organizations where you feel you could benefit with your company and what you have to offer into the marketplace. And that's available throughout the world. They're there to work for you, and let's put them to work. They want to see a lot of export, and that's what you'd like to see to grow your business, as do we. There's also the Center for International Trade Development. I met a few of those very talented individuals today, Renee and Lily, who are working hard to develop and help companies located here develop their international trade strategies and identify markets that they can enter. So it's available to us here. It's provided to us by the US government or at small charge. We really need to take advantage of this and grow our exports. 2% is too small. We need to see 30 or 40% of US companies exporting. We have a lot to offer to this world. Let's get it out there. All right, thanks very much for your time.
Now to, we've gone from consumer products to infrastructure products, and now we're talking about fixed investment in China. And I have a great pleasure to introduce a distinguished alumnus of California State University Fullerton, Mr. Robert Taylor. He's the founder of the Remm Group, a real estate and investment firm that he established over 30 years ago. He has both a bachelor's and MBA from Cal State Fullerton, and he's the past president of the Mialo College of Business and Economics Executive Council, and a founding member of the Real Estate and Land Use Institute. That door, that's right next to my door, up there on the 5th floor. Anyway, he, in addition to introducing Chinese investors to sellers of real estate properties here in the U.S., he also is a consultant to the Ministry of Construction for the People's Republic of China. So he does business on both sides of the Pacific. He currently has offices, well, he's had offices in Anaheim for many years, and he also has had offices in Beijing since 1996. So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Mr. Robert Taylor.
Ni hao. I'll try and move through these slides very quickly, and they'll be available to anyone who wants them after the presentation. I want to take a second to welcome our group from China. When I go to Beijing, for me, it's like going to my second home, and it's great for me to see good friends and business partners. And we hope the best for our Chinese visitors here, that they'll see Orange County as their second home. So, the company was founded in 1978, and as Jeff indicated, we're basically managed property. We take investors from around the world, actually. We did the management and acquisition for Metsui back from the 85 to 98, and we see the same trend coming from China in the next decade. And starting as we speak right now, you're seeing Chinese investment into the U.S. We're a consultant to the People's Republic of China and had the opportunity to sponsor the very first group from the Ministry of Construction in 1996 to the U.S. There was a group of 16. One of those members of the 16 is currently the Minister of Construction, and another member is actually my business partner now with Remm International. We also, in addition to investments here in the U.S., we work with our Chinese partners to help their business do better in China and to introduce U.S. businesses to China. During this past year, we took the largest parking company in the People's Republic of China and did a joint venture with Walker Parking. They're the largest structural engineers and architects in the world for parking. We'll be bidding on the Shanghai Disneyland project and also the second major airport in Beijing, along with probably in the next 10 years, maybe 1,000 parking structures. We have a 10,000 parking space parking structure that will be developed in Beijing. That's coming up soon. In addition to China, we have in China probably in the next 20 years, a third of the population will be over 60 years old. That's about 300 to 400 million people, and they all want to come to Irvine. And there's just not enough space in Irvine for 300 million people. So what we've done is we've worked closely with Chuck Trevisan, who was Don Brin's top architect, and the companies that were used here in Orange County to develop the Irvine Ranch, 92,000 acres. And we're taking that same group to China. So we have proposals out currently to actually build cities in China using the same plan that we use for Irvine. California population, 1960, we were at 15 million. Currently, we're about 38 million. What might be of interest is that 13% of the population of California is Asian, of which about 26% Chinese background. And Chinese is now the third most spoken language in the state of California. And even in Sacramento now, they just changed the ballots, so you not only have English, Hispanic, but you also have Chinese. In Orange County, population's grown to over 3 million population. We have 18% Asians here in Orange County. And I predict that that's going to be more like 35% here in the next decade. 21% of the students at Cal State Fullerton are Asian. 53% at UCI, and at the University of Southern California, it's the largest university in the United States with Asian population. So there's a trend from the 1850s to the present time of immigration from Asia, and particularly China. And you're going to see the flow of capital. It's going to lead to more aggressive immigration from China and more Chinese families establishing roots here in Orange County in California. And the Chinese are already here, investing in Orange County. These are projects that just sold this last year. 7,700 Spectrum just sold for $273 a square foot. It would probably cost $400 a square foot to replace this product. Also, Lakeside Tower just sold for $166 a square foot. This was a great bargain. That computes to about 22,000 RMB per square meter. Again, in China, the same building that might cost $200 a square foot here may cost about $350 a square foot in China, in the major cities. So buying properties here are a real bargain today. Balboa Bay Club just sold to the Winston family of Winston Battery. And along with the resort came the Newport Beach golf course. These are all transactions this year. The opportunity for the U.S. is really tourism, manufacturing, agriculture, and investment. Let's just take tourism for a second. Right now there's about 60 million outbound Chinese tourists. By 2020, there'll be 100 million outbound Chinese tourists. About 10% want to come to the U.S. It's 1/4 the population of California coming to visit, spending about $8,000 per capita. If you figure that out, that's about 80 billion. That's new money, times 7. And taking 8% sales tax on that, we've just solved the California budget. And the only thing that's holding that up has been the visas problem. And I can say for Gary Locke, who's our new ambassador to China, he's doing a fabulous job in opening up the visa process and making it easier for Chinese tourists and business people to come to the U.S. Manufacturing advantages, this is for South Carolina. We have a lower land cost here in the U.S. on the East Coast in South Carolina than we have in Shenzhen as an example. Lower power costs, reliable power, raw material. We're close to the textile and cotton industry. Financing, the Chinese government will actually finance 30% of a Chinese company wanting to come here to the U.S. and open up shop. And then premium pricing. Maybe this jacket may have cost $100 in China, but if it had made in U.S. label, it would go for maybe $300 or $400, that much of a premium for a U.S. product. This is my favorite chart, and this was spoken about earlier. This is U.S. exports to mainland China. And you see it's straight up. We're about 11 billion per month right now. And according to Gary Locke and his ambition, they want to raise this to about 22 billion in the next 3 to 4 years, which is a huge increase. We're looking at U.S. agriculture forecast is up 6.5 billion to 47 billion surplus. This is for the entire U.S. Surplus. And I don't know if you're aware of or not, but the northern part of China has gone through a very serious drought in the last 5 years, just as we've had in the Texas region. And a great opportunity for California to open up our trade for agriculture. And what have we done in California? But we shut off the water supply to the Great Valley in the last 5 years. And I think we need to stop the water wars between the north and the south and open up our irrigation. And every square inch of California really should be under cultivation right now. And great opportunity for California. The targeted investments in the U.S. is really health because of, again, the aging population of China. Commodities, there's a great need for food products, technology, energy, and hospitality. And you may have just read recently where the U.S. actually, our exports of energy actually was greater than our import of energy. And most of that's coal going from the Pacific Northwest over to China. And U.S. growth for China, manufacturing and agriculture, increased 330% in the last 10 years. And we created 3 million jobs. Doing business in China, as we've all said, you've heard out throughout the morning here, is really understand the culture. And most importantly, I think, is to connect with the universities. If you're going to do business in China, pick the university that ties in with the type of business that you're in. We have a very close relationship because we're in the real estate business with 2 universities, one in Tianjin and in Beijing, a university for the Forestry University, which is the primary property management college in China. And then a good Chinese partner is critical. With my Chinese partner, he makes all decisions in China, and I make all decisions in the U.S., and we've been very, very successful working under that arrangement. And of course, as indicated before, lots of patience. And the challenge is really to look at China not through the eyes of a politician, but through the eyes of an entrepreneur. And I'm glad to see the changes in our government over the last even just 6 months, looking at China and thinking in different mentality as to how we increase the exports and how we can do further business with China. So only good news. There's a bill before Congress right now from, I think it's Mike Lee, a senator out of Utah, in conjunction with the senator out of New York, Charles Sumner. If you invest $500,000 in a house, you can get a green card. If that goes through, fasten your seatbelt, because Irvine and Southern California and Orange County in particular is just going to take off like a skyrocket. So, thank you.
Thank you. We're probably going to have a few questions here, but I'd like to at least lead with one of them, Bob, if you don't mind. How do you see the Chinese immigration to Orange County influencing the local real estate market?
Well, I think it's going to be huge. The first wave is going to be the residential, and then follows up with office, and we're starting to see the office market turning already. From about 17% vacancy, we're now down to about 14% vacancy. But there's not that much, square footage-wise, it's not going to take that many companies coming in to Southern California to change the entire office market. And then following up on that is retail. So I think you're going to see if you look at any area in Orange County that has an Asian population, you're going to see shopping centers and office buildings that are 100% occupied.
Is there any correlation between what's going on in China and some of the talk about the real estate bubble there and where you see the money flowing?
Well, it is. It's almost like the perfect storm. If 3 or 4 years ago we were asking Chinese investors to invest in the U.S., they'd say, well, why would we do that? We're getting 15, 20, 30% appreciation investing in single-family condo units in Beijing and in the major cities and in the secondary market also. But that's all changed. There's now 65 million vacant homes in China. And when we were there this last time, we actually met with the Vice Minister of Construction, and he was making a report to the Congress the very next day where they want to build another 35 million homes for the low-income people. So, and then again, the focus is now going into commercial development, and that's one of the concerns that we have, is that they build the wrong product or build product that's not necessary, not having the market research that is necessary before they build. But 70% of the GDP of China is construction and government driven, so it's definitely a bubble. And in answer to your question, a lot of folks that have made money in the last few years don't see the opportunity local and are looking to move the money offshore.
Sounds great. Dr. Smedley, I have a question for you as well. Everyone's talked about patience in doing business with China, but if you could explain for us how you closed your first sale and how long it took.
Yeah, well, that's a tall question, but basically it's about, as Chris described, about establishing first some kind of a personal relationship with the potential customer and developing that over time. So from our standpoint, it was about 3 or 4 years of developing a relationship before getting the first sale. And this particular customer is, in the very early stages of, okay, well, let's try 1 or 2 and see how they go, and then we'll see how it goes from there. Then maybe we'll want 10, and maybe in 2 years we'll want 1,000 of them. So we'll just see what happens. But you kind of can't stop at one customer, so we're also trying to develop relationships with numerous other customers in parallel. But it's a fairly long road, and patience, as all of us, I think, stated on our presentations, is really the key to getting that kind of thing done, especially when you're dealing with something such as infrastructure, which is what we deal in. So.
And Chris, I have a question for you as well. You mentioned the importance of saving face and the implication that has for doing business in China. Can you give us a sort of a ground level example of how that's applied in your case?
Sure, Jeff. One of the things for a company to be successful in China is an American company. A decision maker has to be involved directly in the business, in the export project. And what you might find, how FACE would impact that. If there's a problem in country, your partner may be reluctant to just come out and say what the problem is because you're a decision maker, and there's part of FACE in China is you don't want to give bad news to a decision maker. I mean, the person that gives the bad news isn't happy to do that. So there's a reluctance to do that, and that could be an example where you think you're not getting the straight answer, but it's not because of an interest in like dishonesty or they want to deceive you. It's more they're very reluctant to give bad news to a decision maker.
Okay, so I'd like to open this up to the floor for any questions you might have. Sean, you have the okay, yes, sir. If you would kindly state your name and your question, please.
Yes. Hi, I'm Aaron Weiner of Pacificor Tenant Advisory Services. Bob, you had a slide up there that I had to blink at a couple of times. Manufacturing advantages in the United States. I thought that the trend for the last 30 years has been outsourcing manufacturing to the cheaper production costs in China. Has that shifted now?
Well, labor costs have gone up in China also, but if you take a look at, like, for textiles, cotton is actually in the south of the United States, has to be exported to China and then manufactured of textiles back here to the U.S. Once it's produced. But actually it's an advantage now to be close to the raw material and to produce the clothing in South Carolina and then ship that clothing to China because of the premium pricing that you can get for American-made products. And that's the trend now. People have money. They're not looking for the cheapest product. They're looking for quality. And that's why our manufacturing exports are just skyrocketing at the present time.
I could perhaps add to that a little bit. In my work with the governor's office, we handle FDI inquiries and other things. And we've had some of the largest companies, that brands very well, that are making products that maybe are marginal as far as China is concerned, but they've been making them there for a long time. Bulky items, still maybe a 40% cost advantage when it's all said and done, producing in China over maybe in the United States. But these companies are starting to get nervous about a couple of things, and starting to reevaluate, the production sharing arrangements, bringing some of that back closer to the customer because of two things, and primarily. One is transportation cost, disruption of supply chains. We're seeing this all the time now. The second thing is the potential appreciation of the renminbi. So there's a lot of concern about, if you look at the fundamental equilibrium exchange rate for the Chinese yuan, it's looking like it should be somewhere down around 5%. And it's still at about 5 or 5 to the dollar, and still at about 6 or 6.2 or 6.3. So there's a lot of concern about what might happen with those two things. So things in a 30–40% range, people are starting to reconsider a little bit. But you had a follow-up question.
Yes, I did. Is there a trend of, the quality issue is very interesting. Isn't there a trend in China, though? As their population becomes more sophisticated, more affluent, isn't there a trend towards higher quality in China in their manufacturing and their products, brands?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for products made outside of China, foreign products weren't available 20 years ago, so it's a status symbol also for have a brand name for clothing or automobile or whatever you're buying. But brands are very, very important in China. more so than here.
I might add something. I think one of the things that's true about the United States is that the United States has led the world because of innovation. We need to tap into that innovation to create world-leading products that can be exported and people will pay the money to buy them for a couple of reasons. One, it's the best technology. Two, it's made in the USA. It's the brand cachet is one part of it, but also the fact that it's the best product for the job. So it's, we can lead the world in these kinds of things. We just need to be brave enough to say, you know what, we can build it and we can ship it.
I'd like to make a point on that. One of our companies is in the cosmetics industry, and we make all of our products here in the state of California. And through a year and a half of really extensive research into the various Asian markets, we have found about 75% of the females that are in our target market refuse to buy a locally made Chinese shampoo, especially a locally made Chinese soap. They don't trust them. There's no quality control. We found the same thing in Hong Kong. We found the same thing in Taiwan. And what they want is our theme is Made in California, USA, home of the stars. And so and then we stole it from Tiffany, that blue color. And it's really important for the distributors to be able to walk into their retail chains and say, look, it costs more, but it's better, it's made in the USA. Ask this woman, is she gonna buy a domestically made soap for her face? Not a chance. So I just wanted to, once again, Made in USA is extraordinarily important on branding, whether it's cosmetics or any other, ginseng, another company I'm involved with, anything like that. Made in the USA is the key to success.
I think you just touched on something rather important, and that's the Made in California. California throughout the world is as well known as the United States. So by being here in California and making things in California, we really have a leg up around the world. California is a very well-established brand. I just want to put a plug in here for the CMTC, that's CMTC, Center for Manufacturing Technology Consultants, something like that. And we're working with them. They come to manufacturers and help to improve the manufacturing process. They target small to medium-sized companies, and they work across all sectors. They just recently launched an initiative, just exactly that, Made in California. I received an email on it yesterday. So far, 30 manufacturers have signed up for this, including One Cycle Control. And I think that there are a lot of names that will be added to that list as we go forward. They have a very nice logo, which is now on our website, and we're pretty excited to be a member of that group.
Okay, we have another question here. Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe take a little different spin on the same topic. From what I understand, starting with the most recent 5-year plan that's going in place, the Chinese government is redirecting its energies towards providing consumer-oriented commerce and having it being homegrown. I just wonder if one of the panel members might comment from that point of view, to the extent that there's going to be increasing competition from the Chinese companies, the branding issue aside, in terms of many of the consumer and even, you know, industrial products are going to be, they seem to be having more orientation. They're going to put more clout behind having their own companies in their own country create their products to satisfy this need, so they're less export driven.
I'm sorry, so they're less export driven?
Oh.
Not just so they're less export driven, I just parenthetical thought at the end. The issue is that there's a real, they recognize with all the issues in the world that in dealing with their own growth, that they want to take advantage of their own opportunities and satisfy it with their own internal resources. And
Okay.
so the government is going to start enacting programming. They probably already have, I'm not that knowledgeable, to push their own companies to generate the product development and the product deliveries that we may find an opportunity today that may be short-lived.
I have two quick comments on that. One is, you know, that's what the U.S. does with GSA, and every country is trying to build local content as well. And you still have issues like the preeminence of certain American brands. We're talking about beauty products that Patrick Mulcahy was mentioning, and other products like milk. I've had Chinese friends ask me to send them containers of milk, cartons from Costco. There's a real concern in China by these parents of maybe they have 1 or 2 children that their kids are getting really holistic food, and so they're looking for the best source. So that's going to be an issue going forward, and it's an opportunity for American companies, frankly, to capitalize on that. And the other thing is, you know, China looked at pillar industries about 15 years ago, and they said automotive and energy and certain pillar industries were going to be where they put a stake in the ground and demanded local content, you know, and technology transfer. And so that's sort of been where they've really executed, you know, very keenly. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do that in every possible niche and segment. I just think that consumers in China have money and they want certain things. And to some extent, you can see that demand is driving these things. And finally, the Chinese a couple years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, had a big project to court experts from universities back to China. And it was really high profile, and a lot of Chinese graduate students and Ph.D.s went back to China, and they were given very good packages. They were allowed to set up their own research institutions, and they were really going to be incubators of new products and things. Where they were hosted was a lot of universities in China, and Chinese universities just haven't developed as fast as their economy has. And so a lot of these experts that went back to China found that the university that was their home wasn't ready for them. And you know, they didn't have the freedom necessarily, or there wasn't the kind of opportunity for them to do what they wanted to do and execute what they wanted to do. So I think, you know, China's just going to keep progressing, but you know, they're moving up a learning curve in some areas.
I want to just comment, there's 3,000 shopping centers to be developed in the next 5 years in China. And a lot of the retail right now is at the low end or at the very high end from European stores. What's missing is the middle market. And right now, at about 5,500 U.S. chains, there's probably only about 200 that are actually doing business in China, and half of those are fast foods. So there's a huge opportunity for U.S. retailers to move into the China consumer market and fill some of the vacant space in some of these new shopping centers. So that's one of the programs that we're working with ICSC and Mall China to actually set up shop here in Orange County for U.S. retailers to come here. Don't have to go to China, but to meet with shopping center developers and act as an intermediary. So.
Okay, if we don't have any further questions, maybe we can move on to our break.